When people first book in to come and see me, I email them out a new patient information form. I get them to fill it in and send it back to me, obviously with copies of tests and things like that they've had done. I've got a lot of information by the time people actually do get here. And then I say to people, look, you know what, you've written down all this information, which is fantastic, but tell me your story from the beginning. Have you had these gut problems since you're 5, since you're 20, since you're 50? Have you only just had these gut problems from a month ago when you went out for Mexican and you've not been the same since? Have you had these gut problems since you've had a trip to northern New South Wales? Have you been overseas? It's really important to get your side of the story. So, for instance, bloating might be the thing that is really upsetting you. You can put up with the daily headaches. You can put up with the pooing 10 times a day, which is also not healthy, but there will be certain things that are more important to you than others, and certain things that you will say, I really need to get rid of this. This is really bothering me. And it's about understanding your story. You know, you can write anything down, but I need to know if you're a mother with 10 children. I need to know if you're working 80 hours a week. I need to know how well you can cook. I need to know if I'm going to ask you to remove certain foods. Are you actually going to be able to do that? And I need to know what your commitment level is. I don't like to set people up to fail. There is no point me saying to you, I need you to remove 10 foods, if you're going to say to me, you know what, Sharon, that's just not possible. It's important that I understand what you're happy to do, I understand your commitment level, and I can understand what your cooking level is at. When people come in, they sit down, and I often will have a box of tissues right near the consultation table, because it can be a very cathartic experience. And if people have been through a stressful situation, often they will cry. That's okay. And people say to me, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, you really don't need to see me in tears. And I say, look, it's okay. You need to get out of this session what you need to get out of it. If that means you cry, that's an okay thing to happen. I get you to expand on the questions, because sometimes I ask people to explain as much as they can, but some people are not very good at writing down a whole host of things. It's often about getting your actual true story so that I can understand what's going on. Some people on their forms will tell me things and they'll come in and it's really clear to me exactly what's going on, and I can say, look, I think that we've got this problem. Let's look at this sort of diet and come back in 3 weeks. I'm quite a functional naturopath. I like to run tests because tests tell me exactly what's going on. And the reason I like to run tests is because it's all well and good for me to sit here as a naturopath and say, okay, well, you need to take wheat, dairy, eggs, and almonds out of your diet. That's a lot to ask somebody to take out of your diet. And I know people are busy, okay? People have jobs, people have children, people have things going on. I think it's really unfair to ask people to make dietary changes to their diet unless I'm really, really sure I know what's going on. And if we run a test, we'll run a blood test or a breath test, then I can confidently say to people, look, the test says this, let's remove those foods, let's see how we go. So usually with 60 to 70% of the problem is just a straight food intolerance. Sometimes I run a food intolerance test in clinic, but often nowadays I will send it down to a lab in Melbourne, specifically because I'm busier now with patients, and I want to spend my time helping patients, not running blood tests. I never run a blood test for children in clinic because I find that too stressful for myself. So I will often run a blood test. That takes a couple of weeks. We get that test back and I say, okay, let's remove the foods and see what sort of result we get. In 70 to 80% of the people, it's just a straight food intolerance, okay? And then I get them to come back in a couple of weeks. They feel fantastic. Okay, we know exactly what we're dealing with now. We know we've got a food intolerance. Then we start to treat it, because treatment protocols will be different if you've got a food intolerance or a fructose malabsorption issue, or a parasite or a bad bacterial balance in your gut. The treatment protocols are different for each particular thing that you have, and the key is finding out exactly what the cause of the problem is. 8 times out of 10, I will send people out and we'll run a food intolerance test. Sometimes people come to see me and it's really obvious that they've got a fructose malabsorption issue. Sometimes I'll say, look, let's just go on this low fructose diet for a little while and let's see what happens. Or sometimes we will order a fructose malabsorption test, which is a breath test. If it's only a food intolerance and you are very, very strict with those foods and you're still only at 80%, there's another problem. We continue to test until we get 100%, because what's the point of feeling 80% better? You might as well feel 100% better. We need to test. Sometimes we need to go to what we call a stool analysis. This is when I use a company in America nowadays and we send the stool away, and that tells us everything. That tells us the bacteria balance. So that will tell us if you've got a particular bacteria in your gut that is making you unwell. It would tell us if you've got a parasite. It would tell us what your levels of good bacteria are. People often say to me, so should I take probiotics? And I say no. Not until we do a stool analysis, not until we know if you've got enough good bacteria or not. Because sometimes people have plenty of good bacteria, but they have an overgrowth of a particular bad bacteria. And if I know what the particular bad bacteria is, then I can use specific herbal medicines to target that bacteria, which is a much better way to do it. And stool testing is expensive, but it tells me absolutely everything. But that really is the last resort.